Hold the train, servant. Vanessa Whitlock's voice floated through Silverpine Hall like a ribbon dipped in frost, soft enough for the nobles to pretend it was harmless, sharp enough for Emily Carter to feel every word. Emily stood behind the bride with both hands wrapped around 12 feet of white satin and silver lace, careful to keep the fabric from brushing the polished floor where hundreds of candles reflected like trapped stars. Her own gray servant dress was plain, high-collared, and slightly too short at the wrists, the kind of dress meant to make a woman disappear. That was the point. Marjorie Carter had told her so before dawn, while fastening Emily's apron with fingers cold from rings. "You will not lift your head when the Alpha King enters," her stepmother had whispered. "You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not remind anyone that you were ever anything but useful. Useful. Not daughter. Not Carter. Not Omega with a name worth saying. Just useful." Emily kept her gaze lowered as the great hall filled with the scent of roses, pine garlands, expensive perfume, and ambition polished until it shone. Silverpine Hall had been dressed for a royal engagement, its arched windows draped in moon-white silk, its long tables set with crystal goblets, its central dais waiting for King Adrian North, the Alpha King of the Northern Realm. Every guest had come to watch Vanessa become the future Luna of the North. Every guest had also come to see who would be forced to stand behind her. "Careful," Vanessa murmured, glancing over one bare shoulder with a smile that looked perfect from a distance. "If you wrinkle it, everyone will know why your family keeps you in the back halls." A few young noblewomen nearby hid laughter behind gloved fingers. Emily's face warmed, but her hands stayed steady. The train was heavy, heavier than it looked, pulling at her arms with every step Vanessa took toward the center of the hall. 12 feet of fabric for a woman who wanted the whole world to see her arrive, carried by a girl the world had been taught not to see at all. Marjorie watched from beside Lord Cedric Whitlock, her expression smooth with satisfaction. Cedric, Vanessa's father, wore a ceremonial coat embroidered with the Silverpine crest and the confident smile of a man who believed he had already purchased the future. The alliance with the North would make his family untouchable. Vanessa would wear the crown. Marjorie would gain favor for offering her household's obedience. And Emily would remain proof that every unwanted thing could be placed where it belonged. "The spare girl," Vanessa said suddenly, just loud enough for the front row to hear. "That is what we should call her today. Not quite family, not quite staff, but available when something needs carrying." This time the laughter spread farther. Emily felt it press against her ribs, but she did not look up. Across the aisle, a younger maid named Lucy stood frozen with a tray of ceremonial ribbons trembling in her hands. Her eyes were wide, terrified that if anything went wrong, blame would roll downhill until it landed on someone with no protection. Emily shifted the train higher, taking more of the weight into her own arms so Lucy could pass without stepping on the lace. Their eyes met for half a second. Emily gave the smallest nod. "You are safe. I have it." Lucy breathed again. That was the secret no one in Silverpine understood about Emily Carter. They mistook quiet for emptiness. They mistook obedience for surrender. But every day she survived in the shadowed corridors, she learned where fear gathered and how to stand between it and someone smaller. The trumpets sounded at the far end of the hall. Every whisper snapped silent. The great doors began to open, and cold air swept in with the scent of snow, black pine, and distant mountains. Vanessa straightened, radiant and certain. Marjorie's eyes flashed a warning at Emily. "Do not look." Emily lowered her head further, fingers tightening around the train. But as King Adrian North entered Silverpine Hall and the entire room bowed toward him, Emily felt something she had no name for pass through the air, calm and powerful, like winter recognizing a hidden flame. The cold that entered with King Adrian North did not belong to Silverpine. It carried the clean bite of northern mountains, the hush of snowfields, and the kind of authority that made every polished noble suddenly remember how fragile ceremony could be. Emily kept her eyes lowered as she had been ordered, but she felt the hall change around him. Vanessa's train grew heavier in her hands. The laughter from moments before seemed to retreat into the corners, embarrassed by its own smallness. Long before Silverpine dressed her as a servant, Emily had known this hall as a daughter. She had been born Emily Carter, the only child of Robert Carter, a kind alpha whose house sat at the edge of the Pine Valley where the morning fog turned silver before sunrise. Her mother died when Emily was young, but her father never let grief make the house cold. He taught her that strength was not always the loudest howl in the room. Sometimes it was the hand that steadied a frightened child, the voice that calmed a restless wolf, the courage to be gentle where everyone else chose pride. Emily believed him until the winter he passed, and Marjorie arrived with black gloves, careful tears, and a lawyer who spoke of guardianship like a door being locked. Within a month, Emily's room was given to visiting cousins. Within a year, her name was missing from dinner invitations. By the time she turned 23, she slept in a narrow chamber above the linen closet, where the walls smelled faintly of soap and cedar dust. Marjorie said it was practical. Silverpine said it was merciful. Emily learned to call it what it was only in the privacy of her own mind: erasure. Yet even in the back halls, she found ways to remain herself. She sat with elderly Omegas whose hands shook after long ceremonies. She hummed softly to pups when thunder made them cry. She could step into a room full of tense wolves and make the air loosen by speaking gently, by pouring water, by remembering names no one important bothered to learn. It was not magic anyone in Silverpine respected. There were no sparks, no grand display, no strength that bent steel or commanded guards. Her gift was quieter than that, a calming presence, a warmth that soothed the edges of fear. To Marjorie, it was useless. To the people who needed it, it was everything. That was why Emily noticed Lucy trembling before anyone else did. That was why she took the extra weight of Vanessa's train without complaint. That was why, even now, as the Alpha King crossed the hall beneath the gaze of every noble in Silverpine, Emily listened not to the music, but to the breathing around her. The court was nervous. Vanessa was excited. Marjorie was hungry for victory. Lord Cedric Whitlock smelled of satisfaction hidden beneath expensive cologne. And somewhere near the royal entrance, one of the younger northern guards was fighting to keep his composure in the packed hall. Emily heard the faint hitch in his breath before she dared lift her eyes even an inch. He was barely older than she was, standing behind the king with his jaw tight, his gloved fingers rigid at his side. The crowd pressed close. The lights were too bright. Every gaze searched the northern party for weakness. Emily knew that feeling. Without thinking, she shifted just enough to reach the side table, lifted a glass of water, and set it near the guard's elbow as she passed behind Vanessa. "Breathe with the candles," she murmured, so softly no one else should have heard. "Slow in, slow out. You are safe where you stand." The guard's eyes flickered to her, startled, then grateful. His shoulders lowered by a fraction. Emily returned her gaze to the floor before Vanessa noticed. But across the marble, King Adrian North had seen everything. The moment before the royal greeting should have belonged entirely to Vanessa Whitlock. Every ribbon, every candle, every polished smile in Silverpine Hall had been arranged to make her look inevitable. She stood at the center of the aisle in white satin and silver lace, her golden hair woven beneath a delicate moon veil, her chin lifted with the practiced softness of a woman who had been taught that beauty was more powerful when it pretended not to know itself. Lord Cedric watched her with satisfaction from the front row, one hand resting over his family crest. Marjorie stood nearby, her eyes moving between Vanessa and the Alpha King, as if counting future favors before they had been granted. Emily remained behind the bride, holding the long train, her own gray dress nearly lost against the marble shadows. That was where they wanted her, close enough to serve, far enough to vanish. The officiant raised his silver staff, and the hall quieted into ceremonial stillness. "Silverpine welcomes the Northern Crown," he announced. "Today, two great houses stand before the moon to honor alliance, order, and the future stability of our people." The words sounded grand, but Emily heard what lived beneath them. Arrangement, ambition, a crown treated like a prize to be negotiated across a banquet table. Vanessa took one graceful step forward, and Emily followed, gathering the train carefully so it flowed behind her without a crease. Guests watched Vanessa with admiration and Emily with amusement, as though the contrast had been designed for their entertainment. It had been. Marjorie had chosen Emily's dress herself, dull gray wool against Vanessa's shining white, plain cuffs beside pearl embroidery, soft servant shoes beside crystal-beaded slippers. A bride looks brighter when the shadows know their place. Marjorie had said that morning. Vanessa paused near the dais, then glanced down with a delicate frown. My shoe, she said. The hall heard her. Of course it did. Emily's fingers tightened around the satin. One of the tiny silver clasps near Vanessa's ankle had come loose, though Emily knew it had been secure less than a minute ago. Vanessa extended her foot slightly, not enough to seem rude, only enough to make the command unavoidable. Fix it. Heat rose in Emily's face. She felt the eyes of the hall shift from the bride to the servant behind her. Marjorie's gaze sharpened from the side. Do it. Do not embarrass us. Emily lowered the train with care and knelt on the cold marble. The clasp was small, slippery beneath her fingers, and the lace pooled around her like a white wave meant to remind everyone she did not belong inside it. A few whispers floated from the front row. Poor thing. Carter's forgotten girl. Imagine being placed there on a royal day. Vanessa bent slightly, her smile hidden by the veil. Remember, she whispered, so softly only Emily could hear. He will never see you. For a breath, the words pierced deeper than they should have. Not because Emily wanted to be seen by a king she had never met, but because a lifetime of being unseen could still ache when someone named it. She fastened the clasp and began to rise. Then a quiet sound pulled her attention sideways. Lucy, the young maid from earlier, stood near the ribbon tray, pale with panic. One of the ceremonial cords had slipped loose, and if it tangled beneath the bride's train, Marjorie would blame her before the entire hall. Emily saw it, understood it, and moved without thinking. Still kneeling, she shifted the train across her own lap, hiding the fallen cord from view while Lucy quickly gathered it. The motion made Emily look clumsy. A ripple of laughter passed through the guests. Vanessa's smile sharpened. Marjorie looked furious, but Lucy was safe. Emily bowed her head and accepted the laughter as if it were rain on a roof she had survived before. On the dais, King Adrian North had been offered a ceremonial cup by Lord Cedric. He had not taken it. His silver eyes were fixed on the kneeling Omega in gray, not on the perfect bride standing above her. And for the first time that day, the future Silverpine had planned began to shift. The royal cup remained untouched in Lord Cedric's hand, its silver rim catching the candlelight while the hall waited for a response that did not come. King Adrian North stood on the dais with the stillness of a man who had learned to let silence reveal what words tried to cover. He was taller than the men around him, broad-shouldered beneath a black northern coat, his dark cloak edged in silver and falling straight behind him like a piece of winter night. His face was pale, angular, and unreadable, but his eyes had moved from Vanessa to Emily, and Silverpine felt the movement like a crack in glass. Vanessa noticed first. Her perfect smile held, but the skin around her eyes tightened. "Your Majesty," she said, turning toward him with graceful warmth. "Forgive the interruption. Servants can be nervous when placed near important ceremony." Emily remained on one knee, still holding the lace in both hands. She lowered her gaze again, hoping the attention would pass over her before it became another punishment. But Adrian did not look away. "She seemed steady to me," he said. The sentence was simple, almost quiet, and somehow it made the entire hall uncertain. Lord Cedric gave a polite laugh that found no company. "The girl has been trained to assist. Silverpine values order." "I saw that." Adrian's voice carried no accusation, yet Cedric's smile faltered. Marjorie stepped in with the smoothness of a woman practiced at placing herself between truth and consequence. "Your Majesty, Emily is grateful to serve on such an honored day. She knows her place and takes pride in usefulness." Emily felt the words settle over her shoulders like another apron. Grateful, useful, place. The old cage, polished for guests. Vanessa extended her hand toward the dais, drawing the room back to where it was meant to be. "Perhaps we should continue. The moon waits for no one." A ripple of agreement moved through the nobles, eager to return to a story they understood. Beautiful bride. Northern king. Political union. Servant girl forgotten at the hem. The officiant lifted his staff again, but before he could speak, a muffled sound came from behind the northern guards. The young guard Emily had helped earlier had gone rigid once more, his breathing uneven as the pressure of the hall closed around him. No one else seemed to notice. Or if they did, they pretended not to. A public ceremony had no patience for private distress. Emily saw his fingers curl near his belt, saw his shoulders lock, saw the fight to remain invisible while fear made his body louder than he wanted. She knew that kind of fear too well. Carefully, without standing fully, she reached for the small glass of water she had set near him before. It was just beyond her fingertips. Vanessa's train still lay across her lap. Marjorie's eyes warned her not to move. Emily moved anyway. She lifted the glass and held it out toward the guard, not high enough to draw spectacle, only enough that he could take it if he needed. Slow breaths, she whispered. Count the candles on the left wall. The guard accepted the glass with a faint nod, his breathing easing by degrees. Emily released the cup and returned both hands to the train. It was a tiny act, too small for court history, too small for songs. But Adrian saw it again. This time, he stepped down from the dais. The sound of his boots on the marble was soft, but the hall reacted as if a bell had struck. Vanessa went still. Cedric's face sharpened. Marjorie's hand tightened around her fan. Adrian stopped a few feet from Emily, not close enough to frighten her, not far enough for anyone to pretend she was invisible. "What is your name?" he asked. Emily's breath caught. She had not been asked that in a room like this for years. Before she could answer, Marjorie spoke quickly. "Your Majesty, she is no one of importance. Only a servant from my household." Adrian turned his head slightly, his silver eyes resting on Marjorie with quiet frost. "I asked her." The hall went silent. Emily slowly lifted her eyes, and for the first time that day, she was not looking up from the floor to survive. She was looking at someone who had made space for her voice. "Emily Carter," she said, the name trembling but whole. "My name is Emily Carter." Emily Carter. Her name lingered in the air longer than it should have, fragile and bright, as if Silverpine Hall had forgotten names could belong to the people it tried to bury. For one breath, no one corrected her. No one reduced her. No one smoothed her back into the word servant. Then Vanessa laughed softly, and the spell cracked. "How sweet," she said, turning toward the guests with a smile designed to look amused instead of threatened. "The girl remembers ceremony, makes everyone sentimental." A few nobles chuckled, though uneasily now, because the Alpha King had not smiled. Emily lowered her gaze again, not from obedience, but because attention in Silverpine always came with a cost. Marjorie crossed the marble in 2 sharp steps and rested a jeweled hand on Emily's shoulder. From a distance, it looked maternal. Up close, her fingers pressed just enough to warn. "Forgive her, Your Majesty," Marjorie said. "Emily has a tender nature. It sometimes confuses service with significance." Adrian's silver eyes dropped to Marjorie's hand. The pressure vanished at once. Vanessa seemed to feel the room slipping and reached for control with the elegance of someone catching a falling veil. She lifted a crystal glass from the side table and turned slightly, allowing the candlelight to shine through the pale wine. "Let us not delay the royal rite over household sentiment." Her fingers loosened. The glass tipped. Wine spilled across the white satin near Emily's hands, a bright stain spreading over the lace she had been ordered to protect. A gasp moved through the hall. Vanessa stepped back as if shocked by Emily's carelessness, though Emily had not touched the glass. "Oh," Vanessa breathed. "Emily." The way she said the name made it sound like an accusation. Marjorie's face hardened. "You careless girl." Emily looked at the spreading stain, then at Lucy, who stood nearby with both hands covering her mouth, horrified. The glass had fallen near Lucy's tray. One word from Vanessa, and blame would shift to the younger maid before the ceremony could continue. Emily understood the shape of the trap instantly. She could defend herself and let Lucy be questioned, or she could absorb the shame and keep the girl safe. Some choices did not feel heroic. They only felt familiar. Emily bowed her head. "I am sorry," she said quietly. Vanessa's smile flashed, satisfied and cruel beneath its sweetness. "Kneel when you apologize to your future Luna." The hall went very still. Even Cedric seemed to hesitate, but Marjorie's eyes commanded obedience. Emily lowered herself to the marble again, the spilled wine dampening the lace near her knees. Her cheeks burned, yet her voice remained steady. "I am sorry for the disruption." Lucy's eyes filled with tears. Emily did not look at her. Looking would give the secret away. Vanessa stepped closer, letting the stained train rest in Emily's hands like evidence. "Some girls can be dressed for ceremony," she said, "but never trusted near grace." That was when Adrian moved. Not quickly, not dramatically. He simply stepped between Vanessa's shadow and the kneeling Omega, and the air in the hall changed so sharply several candles trembled. "Enough," he said. One word, quiet as falling snow. Vanessa froze. Marjorie's mouth opened, then closed. Adrian looked down at Emily, not with pity, not with embarrassment for her, but with a respect that made the room feel suddenly unworthy of what it had witnessed. "Did you spill the glass?" he asked. Emily could have lied the easy way. She could have said yes again and kept the peace. But his question was not like the others. It did not corner her. It invited truth. She swallowed. "No, Your Majesty." A murmur rose and died. Adrian turned to the young maid by the tray. "Did she protect you from being blamed?" Lucy trembled, then nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." Vanessa's face drained of warmth. The silence that followed no longer belonged to the bride. It belonged to the girl still kneeling with stained lace in her hands, and to the king who had finally seen the shape of her courage. The truth had entered Silverpine Hall so quietly that many did not recognize it until it stood between them and the story they preferred. Lucy's small nod should have been nothing, a frightened maid answering a king, but it changed the weight of the room. Emily remained kneeling with stained lace in her hands, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. She had told the truth. Lucy had told the truth. And for once, truth had not been immediately punished. Vanessa recovered first, because pride taught quickness where humility taught patience. "The girl is loyal to her own kind," she said lightly, though her voice had lost some of its shine. "Servants protect servants. It does not mean Emily is innocent of carelessness." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. "It means she chose another person's safety over her own dignity." The hall went still again, and this time Emily felt the words settle inside her like warmth near a closed door. Her own dignity. She had almost forgotten it was something she was allowed to possess. Marjorie stepped forward, her face arranged into concern. "Your Majesty, Emily has always been dramatic in quiet ways. She collects sympathy. It is a habit that began after her father died." Emily's throat tightened at the mention of him. Robert Carter had never been spoken of gently in this hall after his death, only used as a ladder others climbed over. Adrian turned toward Marjorie with calm precision. "You speak often for her. As her guardian, it is my duty." "Then your duty ends for the length of one answer." Marjorie's fan froze halfway open. Adrian looked back at Emily. "Miss Carter, do you wish to stand?" The question shook her more than any command could have. "Do you wish?" Not stand. Not kneel. Not apologize. A choice, placed in her hands in front of everyone who had trained her to believe choices belonged to other people. Emily glanced at the stained train, at Lucy's tearful face, at Vanessa's perfect white gown, at Marjorie's warning eyes. Then she looked at Adrian. His expression remained controlled, almost cold, but there was no impatience in it. Only space. Emily released the lace. Slowly, carefully, she rose from the marble. No one breathed until she stood fully. The wine stain remained on the bride's train behind her, bright against white fabric, but it no longer looked like proof of Emily's failure. It looked like proof of Vanessa's cruelty. "Thank you," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian inclined his head, as if her gratitude was not owed but accepted. Lord Cedric cleared his throat, urgency cracking through his polish. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should proceed to the right. Ceremonial nerves have clearly unsettled the household." "The household appears very revealing," Adrian replied. Cedric's smile died at the edges. The officiant, pale and sweating beneath his silver collar, lifted the velvet cushion bearing the royal moon ring. The ring was beautiful in a severe northern way, white gold wrapped around a dark moonstone, said to answer only when the proposed Luna carried a bond the North would recognize. Vanessa stepped forward at once, eager to reclaim the room. Her smile returned, brighter and more brittle than before. "I am ready, Your Majesty." Emily stepped back toward the shadows where she belonged, or where she had always been placed. But as Adrian reached for the ring, the moonstone remained dark. No flicker, no glow, no answer. A whisper moved through the nobles. Vanessa's face held its smile too tightly. Cedric leaned forward. Marjorie went still. Adrian looked at the silent ring, then at Emily, who had retreated halfway behind a pillar with her hands folded against her gray dress. The moonstone pulsed once, faint and silver, toward her. The moonstone's faint silver pulse vanished so quickly that half the hall seemed unsure whether it had happened at all. Vanessa saw it. Emily knew she saw it, because the bride's perfect posture stiffened as if the light had touched her pride instead of the ring. Lord Cedric stepped closer to the officiant, his voice low and urgent. "Begin again." The hall draft interfered with the flame alignment. The officiant swallowed. "My lord, the moonstone does not answer flame." Cedric's eyes warned him into silence. Vanessa lifted her chin and extended her hand toward Adrian, palm up, elegant and steady. "Old stones enjoy drama," she said with a delicate laugh. "Perhaps the North has a sense of humor." No one joined her. Adrian held the ring in his hand and studied it with an expression no one could read. Emily stood half-hidden near the pillar, wishing herself smaller, wishing the floor would remember how to swallow shadows. She had not asked for the ring to look toward her. She had not asked for the king to ask her name. She had not asked for a room full of people to suddenly notice the girl they had spent years teaching themselves to ignore. Marjorie crossed to her side with measured steps, smiling for the room while her voice dropped like a locked door. "Do not move," she whispered. "Do not breathe wrong. Whatever mistake that stone made, you will not make it worse." Emily looked down at her hands. They were still damp from the wine-stained lace, faintly scented with rosewater and fear. "I did nothing," she whispered. "That has never stopped you from causing trouble." On the dais, Adrian lifted the ring. The moonstone remained dark while Vanessa waited. The silence stretched. Then Emily, desperate to remove herself from the center of something she did not understand, took one careful step backward into the deeper shadow behind the pillar. The ring flared. This time there was no mistaking it. Silver light spilled through Adrian's fingers and across the marble, not toward Vanessa, not toward Cedric, not toward the arranged future shining in white satin, but toward Emily Carter in her gray servant dress. The hall inhaled as one. Lucy covered her mouth. Marjorie's hand tightened around Emily's arm, then released when Adrian's gaze found the motion. Vanessa's smile disappeared completely. "That is impossible," she said. Her voice was no longer soft. Adrian looked at the ring, then at Emily, and something in the coldness of his face shifted, not into surprise, but into confirmation, as if the stone had only spoken aloud what he had already begun to know. Cedric stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this rite was prepared for my daughter. Silverpine has honored every agreement. One servant's presence cannot overturn a negotiated alliance." Adrian's eyes moved to him. "Aluna is not negotiated." The word struck harder than a shout. Cedric paled. Vanessa's breath trembled, then steadied into anger. "You would shame me before the whole hall because a stone flickered at an Omega who carries trays?" Adrian's answer came calm and absolute. "No, your cruelty did that before I spoke." The room went silent enough for Emily to hear her own breath. Adrian turned toward the officiant. "The Northern Crown withdraws from this arrangement." The silver staff shook in the officiant's hands. Marjorie made a small sound, sharp with panic. Emily could not move. She felt Vanessa's humiliation like heat in the air, Cedric's fury like a storm behind glass, Marjorie's plans collapsing one quiet piece at a time. Yet Adrian did not look pleased. He did not look victorious. He looked like a man refusing a door because he had finally seen what it was built upon. The moonstone continued to glow toward Emily, steady now, patient as moonlight. Adrian stepped down from the dais, carrying the ring not like a prize, but like a question that deserved care. The crowd parted before him. Emily wanted to lower her eyes, but something inside her, small and long buried, kept them lifted. When he stopped in front of her, he did not reach for her hand. He did not claim the answer for her. He simply said, "Miss Carter, the North has heard you even when this hall would not. Will you hear the truth it offers?" Emily had spent most of her life being told what truth was worth, and the price had always been too high for girls like her. Truth cost a bedroom, a family name, a seat at the table, a voice in the hall. Yet when Adrian North stood before her with the moonstone glowing between them, the truth did not feel like punishment. It felt like a door opening in a room she had forgotten had doors. "I do not understand," she said, and the honesty trembled through her more than fear. Vanessa laughed once, sharp and wounded. "Of course she does not. She is a servant. She does not understand crowns, alliances, or duty." Adrian did not turn around. "Then perhaps she understands what this hall has forgotten." Cedric's face darkened with desperation masked as authority. Your Majesty, Silverpine offered you stability. Silverpine offered me a bride who measured worth by how low others could be made to kneel. The words were quiet, but they traveled to every corner of the hall. Vanessa flinched as if the judgment had finally reached skin beneath silk. Marjorie stepped forward, no longer smooth, no longer patient. Emily is an Omega with no standing. Her father's house supports this alliance. I support this alliance. Emily felt the old ache at the mention of her father's house. Then Adrian looked at her, and the ache did not vanish, but it stopped ruling her. Does your father's house speak through her? He asked. Or over her? Marjorie had no answer that would not reveal her. The moonstone brightened again, silver light touching the plain gray of Emily's sleeve. She stared at it, waiting for someone to explain why something royal would reach for someone so ordinary. Adrian lowered the ring slightly, not offering it yet, not demanding belief. The North does not crown decoration, he said. It does not crown cruelty. The Luna bond answers steadiness, mercy, and the strength to protect others when no one protects you. Emily's eyes burned. She thought of Lucy's trembling hands, the young guard's uneven breathing, the elderly Omegas in the back hall, the pups she had hummed to during storms. Small things, hidden things, things no noble had ever counted. Those are not royal qualities, Vanessa said, but her voice shook. Adrian finally turned to her. They are the only ones that matter. The silence after that felt clean, almost painful. Then Adrian extended one hand to Emily, palm open, not touching her, not claiming her in front of a room that had already taken too much. Stand beside me only if you choose to, he said. The hall seemed to wait for Marjorie's command, Vanessa's insult, Cedric's objection. Emily waited too, out of habit. Then she realized no one else could make this step for her. She looked at Lucy, who nodded through tears. She looked at the Northern Guard, now steady and watching with quiet gratitude. She looked at Marjorie, whose power had always depended on Emily believing she had none. Then Emily placed her hand in Adrian's. His grip was warm, careful, and still. No pull, no possession, just support. She stepped out from the pillar and into the full light of Silverpine Hall. The moonstone flared, bright enough to turn the marble beneath her feet silver. The stained train lay behind Vanessa like the end of an old story. Adrian faced the court with Emily beside him. The arrangement is rejected, he said, not out of insult to beauty, bloodline, or rank, but because the North will not build its future on contempt. His cloak shifted as he turned back to Emily, and in his silver eyes she saw no fairy tale promise, no easy rescue, only recognition. That was more frightening and more precious than either. For the first time since her father died, Emily Carter stood in a room full of people and did not feel like a shadow. She felt like her name had weight again. The light from the moonstone did not fade when Emily stepped beside Adrian. It grew quieter instead, deeper, as if it had stopped trying to prove itself to the room and had begun speaking only to her. Silverpine Hall remained frozen around them, caught between what had been planned and what had become impossible to deny. Vanessa stood in her white gown with the stained train behind her, beautiful still, but no longer untouchable. Lord Cedric's hands curled at his sides, his alliance slipping away without a single raised voice. Marjorie looked at Emily as if seeing her for the first time and hating that there was someone there to see. Adrian released Emily's hand only after she was steady, and that small kindness reached her more sharply than the moonstone's glow. He turned to the attendant holding his northern cloak. The cloak was dark as a winter midnight, lined in pale silver, the crest of the white wolf stitched at the shoulder. When Adrian took it, the hall seemed to understand before he spoke. Vanessa's breath caught. You cannot be serious. Adrian looked at her with calm finality. I have never been more serious. He placed the cloak around Emily's shoulders, not like a trophy, not like a chain, but like shelter. The warmth of it settled over her gray dress, over the plain fabric Marjorie had chosen to make her vanish. The contrast should have made Emily feel exposed. Instead, it made her feel real. The moonstone ring brightened once, and Adrian held it before her without touching her hand. This ring answers you, he said quietly, but your future is still yours to accept or refuse. A murmur passed through the court. A king offering choice to a servant Omega in front of the bride he had rejected was not a ceremony Silverpine knew how to survive. Emily looked at the ring, then at Lucy, then at the young northern guard who stood steady now, no longer fighting the room alone. She looked at Vanessa, whose anger could not hide the hurt beneath it, and at Marjorie, whose control had depended on Emily never believing she could leave. Last, Emily looked at the stained lace on the marble. All day she had carried another woman's train so that someone else could step into the light. Now the light waited for her, and she realized she did not have to apologize for standing in it. "I do not know how to be Luna," she said. Adrian's eyes softened by the smallest degree. "Neither does anyone worthy of becoming one. They learn by caring first." Emily's throat tightened. Slowly, she placed her fingers beneath the ring, accepting its weight without pretending not to tremble. The moonstone flashed silver, then settled into a steady glow. No thunder, no grand spectacle, only a hush that felt like recognition. One by one, the nobles bowed. Some from respect, some from fear, some because the North had spoken and they had no language left to argue. Lucy bowed with tears on her face. The young guard bowed with gratitude. Even the officiant lowered his silver staff. Vanessa did not bow at first. Then Cedric touched her arm, and she lowered her head, not defeated by Emily, but by the truth of what she had chosen to become. Marjorie remained standing a second too long. Adrian's gaze moved to her. "Miss Carter's place is no longer yours to define." Marjorie bowed. Emily thought the sight would satisfy her more. Instead, it only made the old pain feel finished. She had not needed Marjorie to fall. She had needed herself to rise. Adrian offered his arm. "Shall we leave this hall?" Emily looked once toward the back corridors where she had lived like a shadow, then toward the open doors where cold northern air waited beneath the moon. "Yes," she said, and her voice did not shake this time. As they walked, the cloak brushed the marble where the bridal train had dragged before. Guests stepped aside. No one laughed. No one called her spare. No one told her to lower her head. Emily Carter left Silverpine Hall beside the Alpha King of the North, not because a ring had made her worthy, but because kindness had been worthy in her all along.